There's this feeling. A lot of people have it. They just don't really say it out loud. You're doing a lot. I mean, actually a lot. You try. You take things seriously. You don't just disappear when something gets hard. If something needs to be done, you do it. And for a while, that even feels right, like you're on track or something. But then, slowly, something starts to feel off. You can't always explain it right away. It's not obvious. It's more like this quiet missile that keeps coming back. Why doesn't this change anything? Not dramatically. Just nothing really moves. It builds up over time. At first, you don't question it. You just assume the answer is simple. Work a bit harder. Be better. Take on more. That's what you've always been told, right? And honestly, it does work. For a while. Until you start noticing things that don't quite fit that logic. Like people who don't seem that invested, somehow ending up ahead of you. Not always, but often enough that you can't ignore it. And that's where it gets uncomfortable. Because the rule in your head is very basic. If I put in more, I should get more. And then at some point, that just stops being true. Not completely, but enough to mess with you. And it's confusing because nothing is obviously broken. It's not like someone is openly screwing you over. It's not even that the system feels unfair. It's just not responding the way you expect. Effort and result don't really line up. You keep increasing one, and the other barely moves. And that's a weird place to be in. Because from the outside, everything looks fine. You're doing your job, probably better than most. You're reliable. People can count on you. You're not slacking. And still, nothing really changes. You can stay like that for years. Not because you're bad at what you do, but because what you're doing doesn't actually move you anywhere. That's the part that's hard to accept, because it goes against everything you've been taught. Work hard, things improve. Do things well, people notice. Be consistent, it pays off. At some point, you start realizing that doesn't always happen. And now you're kind of stuck in between. You don't want to become cynical. You don't want to believe effort is pointless. But at the same time, reality keeps showing you something else. Effort by itself doesn't really change your position. So your brain tries to smooth it out. It comes up with explanations. Maybe it's timing. Maybe things are just messy right now. Maybe later it'll make sense. And yeah, those explanations sound reasonable. For a while. But then something else shows up. A different kind of feeling. Like you're constantly doing things, but not actually getting anywhere. You're busy, obviously. You're tired more than you used to be. But that sense of movement, it's just not there. And sometimes it hits in really small moments. You look at your income, and it's basically the same, even though you're clearly doing more than before. Or weekends stop feeling like rest. They just feel like a short break before the same loop starts again. And when that happens, it's very easy to turn it back on yourself. Maybe I'm not doing enough. Maybe I need to push harder. Maybe I'm missing something. But sometimes that's not it. Sometimes the problem is simpler and worse. What you're doing just doesn't register in the system that decides the outcome. That system doesn't really care about effort. It reacts to something else. Position. Where you are. What role you're in. How your work is placed. And if that doesn't move, nothing else really does. That's not a nice thought, because it takes away this feeling that everything is under your control. It's much easier to believe that if you just try harder, things will change. At least then there's something you can do. Just do more. But at some point, it becomes hard to ignore that more isn't taking you anywhere new. And that's where a different question starts to appear. Not a comfortable one. What if effort isn't what defines your results anymore? Over time, something shifts. You don't really notice when exactly. It just becomes normal. If what you're doing doesn't change much, you sort of adapt to that. Not consciously. You just keep going. You stay reliable. You do what's expected. You don't make things harder than they need to be. And somewhere in the background, a quiet agreement forms. You don't say it. You don't even think it directly, but it's there. I'll keep doing this. I just won't expect much back. It doesn't happen all at once. You stop expecting a raise. Later, you stop waiting for recognition. At some point, even growth stops feeling like something real. It's just not part of the picture anymore. And then something strange appears. Patience. People usually see it as a good thing, like it means you're stable, that you understand how things work. But here, it works differently, because patience without any real change is just staying in place. You tell yourself you'll wait, that something will shift later, that it's just a matter of time. But the longer that goes on, the harder it becomes to even ask, what exactly is supposed to change? Meanwhile, nothing is pushing back. The system doesn't resist you. It's actually quite comfortable with you. It gets your effort. It gets consistency. There's no reason for it to move. And then you start noticing something else. The more you take on, the more becomes expected. That part grows. But what you get back, it doesn't follow the same pattern. At some point, effort changes its role. It's no longer about moving forward. It becomes maintenance. You're not trying to get somewhere new. You're trying not to lose where you already are. That's a very specific kind of pressure. It's constant. And at the same time, it doesn't really lead anywhere. You just stay in it. Sometimes it's explained as responsibility. Sometimes as maturity. Sometimes as, this is just how life works. And sure, parts of that are true. But none of that actually closes the gap. What happens next is even quieter. You stop resisting. Not dramatically. You just stop pushing against it. And instead, you start explaining it. You tell yourself that money isn't everything, that stability matters more. And those ideas, they sound reasonable. Sometimes they are. But sometimes they're just a way to avoid looking at something directly. Because if you do, it's uncomfortable. It means admitting that what you're doing no longer defines your value in the system you're inside. That something you relied on, effort, isn't working the way you thought it would. And then you fall back on something familiar. You explain. You make sense of it. You tell yourself why it's complicated. Why now isn't the moment. Why things are the way they are. And the more you explain it, the easier it becomes to stay exactly where you are. Because explanation calms things down. It makes everything feel structured, manageable, but it doesn't change anything. Time keeps going. And at some point, a different kind of tiredness shows up. Not just from work, from something else. From not seeing any real connection between what you do and what you get back. That kind of tiredness builds differently. It drains you faster. Because it feels like you're constantly giving something away without really getting anything in return. And then a thought appears, very quietly. Maybe this is just how it is. And that one changes everything. Because once you accept that, there's nothing left to question. You can stay in that state for a long time. People do. You become reliable, easy to work with, predictable. And almost without noticing, you stop being the one deciding where your life is going. That only comes back when a different question appears. Not, why is it like this? But, why am I still here? That question isn't comfortable. It doesn't give you direction. It doesn't solve anything immediately. But it does something important. It brings back honesty. And that's usually the part people avoid. Because honesty here shows something you don't really want to see. That it's not just the system. It's also the fact that you stayed inside it long after it stopped working for you. That's not blame. It's just something that becomes obvious once you stop explaining everything. The connection between effort and results didn't disappear. It moved. And if you keep investing effort in a place where that connection is already broken, nothing really changes. The hardest part isn't figuring out what to do next. It's allowing yourself to see that the old logic doesn't work anymore, without trying to fix it right away, without turning it into a plan, just seeing it and not looking away. Sometimes that's enough for something to shift. Because once you see it clearly, it's not the same as before. And that's usually where this loop starts to break. Not because everything is solved, but because whatever was holding it together isn't really there anymore.